This is the summary of Mockingjay, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Archie. Introduction. Few works of young adult fiction have captured the modern imagination as powerfully as Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games trilogy, and Mockingjay, its final installment, stands as both a culmination and a revelation. Where the first two books leaned into the thrill of survival, defiance, and the fragile spark of hope, this third book drags its readers into the furnace of revolution and asks them to look unflinchingly at the cost of war. It is not a triumphant victory lap for its heroine, Katniss Everdeen, but rather a sobering meditation on what happens when symbols become weapons, when rebellion turns into propaganda, and when even the noblest of causes leave scars too deep to fully heal. In many ways, Mockingjay refuses the comforting arc of a traditional hero's journey. Katniss does not emerge unbroken or glorified, but changed in ways that reflect the trauma of both personal and political battles. Readers are invited into a narrative that balances tension-filled action with long stretches of reflection, weaving an atmosphere of unease and dread that mirrors Katniss's own state of mind. From the ashes of District 12 to the hollow tunnels beneath the Capitol, Collins lays out a story that insists the cost of freedom cannot be paid in spectacle alone. It is etched into human lives, torn families, and fragile psyches. To understand Mockingjay as a whole, one must approach it not just as the final book in a trilogy, but as a mirror held up to our own world. Its themes of manipulation through media, the ethics of war, and the corrosive effect of violence on individuals resonate far beyond the fictional nation of Panem. And as the story unfolds chapter by chapter, it becomes clear that Collins has written not only a dystopian tale, but a sharp commentary on how power and rebellion echo through history. Disclaimer. This summary of Mockingjay, The Hunger Games, Book 3 by Suzanne Collins, is an independent work created to provide a concise and accessible interpretation of the original book's main ideas and narrative. It is not affiliated with, authorized, approved, licensed, or endorsed by Suzanne Collins or her publishers. All content herein is based on publicly available information, the author's original text, and analysis of the book's themes and storylines. This summary is intended as a companion to the original work, not a replacement. For the full depth of Collins's storytelling, character development, and narrative nuance, readers are strongly encouraged to read the complete book. Chapter 1: The Ashes. Section 1. The narrative begins with Katniss Everdeen walking through the remnants of District 12, her home reduced to smoldering ruins. After the Capitol's devastating assault, almost nothing remains except the charred foundations of houses and blackened chimneys standing like monuments to the dead. The once lively meadow is transformed into a graveyard, where the bodies of thousands were burned. The destruction is not only physical but deeply psychological, intended as punishment for Katniss's defiance in the arena, and as a warning to all who might resist the Capitol. She wanders among the ruins in silence, feeling the heavy weight of guilt that the rebellion's momentum and her symbolic role have brought such devastation to her people. District 13 has taken in the survivors, but the underground society is a stark contrast to the life Katniss once knew. Governed by strict schedules, curfews, and rationing, the district functions like a military machine. Every citizen is given assignments, their daily lives reduced to efficiency and discipline. To many, this order offers safety, but for Katniss it often feels suffocating. She is expected to conform, but the trauma of loss makes it difficult for her to accept the structure imposed upon her. The ashes of District 12 remain etched in her mind, a constant reminder that nothing is safe, and that her every action carries consequences far greater than herself. From the beginning, District 13's leadership makes clear their intentions for Katniss. President Coin, whose calm authority conceals a calculating ambition, sees her less as an individual and more as a powerful tool. Plutarch Heavensby, once the Capitol's gaymaker, now uses his talent for strategy to craft propaganda in the rebellion's favor. They press Katniss to become the Mockingjay, the symbol of resistance for Panem. Yet she resists the role, weighed down by uncertainty, trauma, and a reluctance to be manipulated. Her defiance is rooted not in cowardice but in exhaustion, as she struggles to reconcile her own survival with the deaths of so many others. Even as leaders push her into the spotlight, Katniss feels her personal relationships shifting under the strain of war. Her mother immerses herself in medical work, leaving little time for grief. Prim, once the fragile younger sister Katniss devoted her life to protecting, is changing, showing signs of resilience and independence. Gale, once her hunting partner and confidant, becomes more deeply tied to the rebellion, his anger at the capital sharpening into a ruthless determination. Most painful of all are the televised images of Peeta, held captive by the capital. His calm pleas for peace broadcast to the nation strike Katniss like arrows. She knows he is being used, yet she cannot ignore the possibility that he truly believes what he says. His captivity becomes another battlefield, and each broadcast gnaws at Katniss's heart. Section 2. Back in the underground confines of District 13, Katniss grapples with the conflicting demands of her role. The district itself is unlike any place she has ever known. Carved into the earth, it functions almost like a hive, every aspect of life dictated by efficiency and survival. Citizens receive schedules printed on thin gray slips of paper, mapping out their days from wake-up call to lights out. Meals are simple and functional, uniforms are standardized, and luxuries are virtually non-existent. What once felt like the strict rules of the capital now appears in a different form, but Katniss cannot help but notice how little choice she truly has here either. Though it offers safety, District 13 often feels more like a bunker than a home, and her restless spirit struggles against its rigid structure. The rebellion's leadership places enormous weight on Katniss as the potential Mockingjay. President Coin maintains an air of cool professionalism, presenting herself as pragmatic and focused on the larger cause. Yet her distance makes it clear that she regards Katniss as an asset, not a partner. Plutarch Heavensby works alongside her, channeling his gaymaker instincts into propaganda, designing propos that will inspire the districts and undermine the capital's control. They propose stylized videos, dramatic speeches, and carefully staged appearances. For them, Katniss is the face of the revolution, but she cannot bring herself to embrace this performance. The pressure unsettles her, as does the thought of becoming a figurehead in a war she feels unprepared to lead. Katniss's reluctance stems partly from trauma, but also from a sense of disconnection. She has been asked to fight for a cause larger than herself, yet her most pressing thoughts are deeply personal: the safety of her family, the well-being of Peeta, and her own fractured state of mind. Every time she sees his image on the screens, his voice calm, his expression controlled, she feels torn in two. He speaks against the rebellion, calling for peace, and his words are broadcast to undermine her and sow doubt among the districts. The capital's manipulation is clear, yet Katniss cannot simply dismiss his statements. She knows Peeta well enough to hear the truth beneath the strain in his voice, to recognize the signs of coercion. His suffering becomes unbearable because she feels powerless to intervene. While Peeta's captivity gnaws at her, life in District 13 continues with relentless order. Her mother tends to the sick and wounded in the medical wards, Prim begins training her beloved cat Buttercup for emergency duties, and Gale spends his days strategizing with soldiers. Everyone seems to be finding their place within the rebellion, carving out a role that suits their skills. Katniss, by contrast, feels displaced, caught between the expectations of leadership and her own instincts for survival. The tension between her personal desires and the collective needs of the rebellion begins to take shape as one of her deepest struggles. Even as the rebels press her to become their Mockingjay, she remains haunted by the ruins of her district, wondering if she has the strength or the will to become the symbol they demand. Section 3. The pressure for Katniss to assume the mantle of the Mockingjay intensifies as District 13's leaders emphasize the urgency of uniting the districts. Yet she remains resistant, unwilling to let herself be molded into a propaganda tool. In her mind, the cause of the rebellion is not abstract, it is bound up with the lives of those closest to her. She fears that becoming the Mockingjay will only increase the capital's retaliation, putting Prim, her mother, and even Gale at greater risk. Her hesitation frustrates those around her, who believe the rebellion cannot reach its full strength without her public commitment. To them, Katniss is not just one fighter among many, she is the spark that ignited the flames, the only figure who can rally Panem with her presence. Amid this tension, President Snow's propaganda campaign escalates. Peeta appears once again on Capitol broadcasts, his words calm but his expression strained. He calls for a ceasefire, warning the districts that rebellion will only bring ruin, and his voice carries a haunting resonance because of the history he shares with Katniss. The Capitol exploits this bond mercilessly, turning him into a weapon meant to weaken her resolve. Each time he speaks, Katniss feels the conflict tearing her apart. She recognizes the coercion but also hears in his voice the boy who once protected her in the arena. His suffering becomes her private torment, even as the rebellion insists she harden herself and focus on the larger picture. The leaders of District 13 attempt to prepare her for the role they demand by outlining what it would mean to be the Mockingjay. They speak of speeches and appearances, of rallying soldiers and inspiring hope, of becoming the face of the war. To Katniss, however, these expectations feel hollow and disconnected from reality. She does not see herself as a polished leader or a charismatic speaker. She is a survivor, bruised by the arena and marked by trauma. What she wants most is to protect the few people she loves, not to carry the weight of an entire nation's future. The idea of stepping into this role feels like another form of control, echoing the Capitol's manipulation in a new guise. Katniss wrestles with her decision, torn between personal fear and collective responsibility. On the one hand, she knows that refusing could cripple the rebellion's ability to rally the districts. On the other, she resents being pushed into a role she did not choose. The ashes of District 12 remain vivid in her memory, feeding her anger toward the Capitol but also her guilt for having unwittingly brought this destruction upon her people. She begins to understand that her choice will shape not only the rebellion, but also her identity. Whether she accepts the role of Mockingjay or not, she cannot escape the truth. She has already become a symbol, and the world will not stop watching her. Section 4. The pressure surrounding Katniss reaches a breaking point when she is called to negotiate her role as the Mockingjay more directly. For the first time, she begins to consider what it would take for her to agree. District 13's leaders treat her like a piece on a chessboard, but Katniss refuses to allow herself to be used without conditions. If she is to become the Mockingjay, she wants assurances that her cooperation will secure real gains, not just for the rebellion but for those she loves. In this moment, her defiance shifts from passive resistance to active bargaining, as she realizes that her position gives her a rare kind of leverage. Her demands are rooted in both loyalty and principle. She insists that her family be granted the right to keep their beloved cat, Buttercup, despite District 13's rigid rules against non-essential animals. More importantly, she requires that Prim be allowed to keep training in the medical field, ensuring that her younger sister is not reduced to a life of narrow utility in the underground district. Katniss also pushes for direct promises of protection for Peeta and the other victors captured by the Capitol, including Johanna Mason and Enabaria. She will not allow the rebellion to treat them as expendable. These conditions show that despite her hesitation, Katniss is beginning to think strategically, asserting her power to set terms even within the strict hierarchy of 13. The negotiation reveals much about District 13's leadership, particularly President Coin. Coin listens carefully and ultimately agrees to Katniss's terms, but her cool, measured responses make it clear that this is a calculated decision rather than a concession born of empathy. She recognizes the necessity of winning Katniss over, not out of kindness, but because the rebellion cannot afford to lose the Mockingjay. The exchange establishes a subtle but growing tension between Katniss and Coin, hinting at the conflicts that will come to define their relationship as the war intensifies. Katniss secures what she wants, but she also realizes that trust will never fully exist between them. By the close of this chapter, Katniss's resistance begins to soften into reluctant acceptance. She still feels unprepared, still resents being forced into a symbolic role, but the negotiations give her a sense of agency she had previously lacked. She understands that she cannot control the rebellion or its leaders, but she can at least protect her family and hold on to pieces of her humanity. The ashes of District 12 continue to weigh heavily on her mind, serving as both warning and motivation. Having drawn her line in the sand, Katniss steps closer to becoming the Mockingjay, not because she has been convinced by Coin or Plutarch, but because she has managed to claim a measure of control in a world that constantly seeks to strip it away. Section 5. With her conditions secured, Katniss begins to step into the role of the Mockingjay more deliberately, though she does so with a mix of reluctance and resolve. To embody this symbol, she requires not just political agreements, but also a physical transformation. District 13's leaders turn to Cinna, her stylist from the games, who had already begun designing Mockingjay-themed outfits for her before his capture by the Capitol. Though he is gone, his vision remains, passed along through sketches and instructions he left behind. The act of wearing his designs becomes deeply personal for Katniss, connecting her to the man who once gave her confidence in the arena and reminding her that he too believed in the power she carried. His absence is painful, yet his legacy provides a sense of strength that scripted speeches and propaganda cannot. The process of preparing Katniss for her role highlights the stark differences between art and politics. The leaders of District 13 focus on how she will appear to the districts, what words she will speak, how she will look, how the propos will be framed. But for Katniss, the true significance lies in how these preparations make her feel. Wearing Cinna's creations allows her to channel something authentic, to see herself as more than a pawn in the rebellion's strategy. She is reminded that symbols gain power not through fabrication but through belief, and her connection to Cinna's vision helps her take the first genuine step toward becoming the Mockingjay. At the same time, Katniss continues to wrestle with the Capitol's manipulation of Peeta. His broadcasts grow more unsettling, each one revealing more strain in his voice and more visible toll on his body. To the wider districts he may appear to be speaking freely, but Katniss sees the truth. His calm appeals for peace conceal desperation, and the Capitol's cruelty is evident in the way his words are used to undermine her. The tension between them becomes unbearable, because she knows that while she is being prepared to inspire rebellion, Peeta is being forced into the role of suppressing it. Their fates are bound together, but in opposite directions, making her Mockingjay identity feel both essential and tragic. As she tries on the Mockingjay armor for the first time, Katniss begins to understand the scale of what she represents. The sleek black suit, fitted with wings and designed for battle, transforms her into something larger than herself. She is not only Katniss Everdeen, survivor of the games, she is now the face of a movement that stretches across Panem. The transformation does not erase her doubts, but it places her at the center of history in a way she cannot deny. Though she did not choose this path, the rebellion has chosen her, and her acceptance, however reluctant, signals a turning point. In the ashes of her ruined district, a new figure rises, one shaped by loss, by defiance, and by the lingering echoes of those who believed in her even when she could not believe in herself. Section 6. With her new identity as the Mockingjay beginning to take shape, Katniss is thrust into the process of creating propaganda films or propos, designed to be broadcast throughout the districts. The leadership of District 13 believes these videos are essential for inspiring rebellion, and they attempt to script Katniss's speeches carefully. But when she delivers the prepared lines, they come out flat, devoid of the fire and authenticity the rebellion craves. Katniss's inability to perform on command frustrates those in charge, but it also underscores an important truth. Her power does not lie in rehearsed speeches but in genuine unscripted moments of passion. This realization prompts Plutarch and Haymitch to reframe their approach. Instead of forcing Katniss to act in stage settings, they decide to take her into the heart of the conflict so she can speak naturally. By putting her in situations where her emotions cannot be contained, they hope to capture the authenticity that made her such a compelling figure during the games. It is a risky strategy, but it acknowledges who Katniss is at her core, not a performer but someone whose strength emerges in the face of injustice. Haymitch, though often blunt in his assessments, is the first to articulate this clearly, pointing out that the moments when Katniss has moved people most have always been when she was acting out of instinct, not obligation. Katniss herself begins to grasp this truth during her early attempts at filming. She feels the weight of expectation pressing down on her, the cameras turning her into a figure she does not recognize. Yet beneath her reluctance lies a deep well of anger at the Capitol's cruelty, and grief for those who have been lost. The destruction of District 12, the suffering of survivors, and the sight of Peeta on television all feed into her emotions. When she allows herself to speak from that place of raw honesty rather than rehearsed lines, her words ring with a power that scripted speeches could never achieve. The cameras capture these unguarded moments, and the leaders of 13 recognize at last that this is the Mockingjay they need to show the world. The process remains emotionally exhausting for Katniss. Each performance reminds her of the symbolic role she has been forced into, and each broadcast of Peeta underscores the Capitol's hold over her. Yet something begins to shift in her perspective. By rejecting artifice and embracing her genuine emotions, she finds a path forward that feels less like manipulation and more like truth. She does not have to become the Mockingjay in the way Coin and Plutarch envisioned. Instead, she can redefine what the symbol means by grounding it in her own authentic voice. This realization gives her a fragile sense of control, even as the weight of war continues to bear down on her. Section 7. The rebellion puts its new strategy into action by taking Katniss out of the underground confines of District 13 and into a war zone. She is flown to District 8, where fighting against the Capitol is fierce and casualties are high. The purpose of the trip is twofold: to inspire the rebels with her presence, and to capture authentic footage that can be used in propaganda broadcasts. For Katniss, the experience is overwhelming. She steps into a city ravaged by conflict, where hospitals are crowded with the wounded, and where every face she encounters bears the marks of suffering. The devastation is not abstract here. It is immediate, visceral, and impossible to ignore. Inside the hospital, Katniss sees firsthand the cost of rebellion. The wounded greet her with reverence, some too weak to speak but reaching out to touch her hand, whispering words of encouragement, or simply staring at her as though she embodies their only hope. The encounter is humbling but also deeply unsettling. Katniss never asked to be anyone's savior, and yet these people look to her as if her very presence could guarantee their survival. The cameras follow her through these interactions, capturing the authenticity of her emotions as she tries to comfort the sick and wounded. Though she feels unworthy of their devotion, her compassion and sincerity shine through, creating some of the most powerful images the rebellion has yet produced. The moment of fragile hope does not last. Alarms sound as Capitol aircraft approach, and soon the hospital becomes the target of a bombing raid. Katniss and Gale rush to the rooftops with rebel soldiers to fight back. The attack is brutal and indiscriminate, aimed not at military installations but at a building filled with the injured and dying. As the explosions tear through the hospital, killing countless civilians, Katniss is overcome with fury. In that instant, the words she could never find in rehearsals pour out of her, directed straight at the Capitol. She denounces their cruelty and vows vengeance, her voice raw with anger and grief. The cameras capture every second, and the rebellion knows immediately that this footage is what they have been waiting for. The bombing of District 8 solidifies Katniss's role in the rebellion in a way no staged performance ever could. Her promise of justice, delivered in the midst of chaos, resonates across Panem, transforming her from a reluctant participant into a figure of defiance. For the rebels, the Mockingjay is no longer an idea being forced into existence. She is real, born out of tragedy and rage. Yet for Katniss, the experience leaves scars. She cannot forget the faces of those she met in the hospital, nor the screams that echoed as the building collapsed. Even as her image inspires others, she is haunted by the knowledge that every word she speaks will cost lives, and every step she takes will carry consequences she cannot control. Section 8. The broadcast from District 8 spreads quickly through the districts, and Katniss's furious vow against the capital becomes the rallying cry of the rebellion. For the first time, she sees how her words, captured in a moment of raw anger, can inspire an entire nation. The propos featuring her defiance are transmitted in secret across Panem, igniting hope where despair had lingered. Yet the capital is not idle. Almost immediately, President Snow counters with new footage of Peeta, who appears thinner, paler, and more visibly strained. His appeals grow more urgent as he warns the rebels to stop fighting before the capital unleashes consequences they cannot withstand. The contrast between Katniss's rage and Peeta's pleas creates a painful tension, as though the two are speaking directly to one another across the divide of war. Katniss is torn by the broadcasts. On one hand, she knows Peeta is being coerced, his words twisted by the capital to undermine her. On the other, she cannot help but feel the sting of his warnings, because they come from someone who has always been her partner in survival. His eyes on the screen seem to plead with her personally, and she cannot shake the fear that he might be right, that rebellion will only lead to more devastation like the ruins of District 12. His suffering becomes unbearable to watch, yet she cannot turn away, knowing each broadcast is both a lifeline and a torment. The leaders of District 13 seize on the propaganda war, continuing to broadcast Katniss's authentic footage while carefully studying Peeta's appearances. It becomes clear that his health is deteriorating under capital control. His words, once calm and measured, now come out more frantic, and his face reveals the strain of torture and manipulation. For Katniss, the broadcasts are a knife that cuts deeper with each appearance. She begins to understand that Snow's strategy is not just to weaken the rebellion, but to destabilize her personally, to use Peeta as a weapon against her. The more she is forced to watch him unravel, the more unbearable the burden of her role becomes. Her private turmoil collides with her public responsibilities. She continues to film new propos, each one gaining more traction in the districts, but she does so with Peeta's image burned into her thoughts. The juxtaposition is agonizing. While she inspires rebellion with her defiance, he urges peace with his desperation, and both are being used as symbols by opposing sides. Katniss begins to wonder how much of Peeta the capital has already destroyed, and whether there will be anything left of him if the rebellion ever manages to bring him back. The hope she once clung to grows fragile, tempered by the awareness that survival alone does not guarantee salvation. Section 9. The struggle between capital propaganda and rebel broadcasts reaches a breaking point when Peeta appears on air again, this time in visibly dire condition. His words, once carefully measured, now carry a frantic edge. He warns urgently that the capital is preparing to destroy District 13, revealing specific details that make his message impossible to ignore. Unlike his earlier pleas for peace, this is not framed as persuasion but as a desperate attempt to save lives. For Katniss, the moment is both terrifying and heartbreaking. She can see how much he has been broken down, his body frail and his face worn, but beneath the capital's control, his loyalty still pushes through. Even under duress, he risks everything to send her and the rebellion a warning. The leadership of District 13 does not hesitate to act. Coin orders an immediate evacuation into the underground bunkers, the entire population moving swiftly into the hardened shelter systems designed for such an emergency. The drills they have practiced repeatedly are now carried out for real, and the severity of the threat becomes undeniable. As the alarms sound and the bunker doors begin to seal, the people of 13 brace themselves for the assault. Katniss is swept up in the movement, her mind fixed on Peeta's gaunt face, realizing that his suffering has given them the chance to survive. When the capital's attack begins, it is with overwhelming force. Waves of missiles rain down on District 13, shaking the earth and reverberating through the underground caverns. For hours the people wait in darkness and fear, as the ground quakes with every impact. The children cry, the adults remain silent, and Katniss feels the oppressive weight of helplessness. She clutches her family close, haunted by the thought of Peeta enduring torture above ground while she hides below. The capital's reach feels suffocating, and the war that once seemed distant is now pressing directly against their walls. After what feels like endless hours, the bombardment finally ceases. District 13 emerges to find that the surface has been scarred but not destroyed, its underground structure having held firm against the attack. Relief sweeps through the survivors, but the cost of survival hangs heavily. Katniss cannot celebrate their endurance, because Peeta remains in enemy hands, punished for trying to save them. His act of defiance has made him more vulnerable than ever, and she knows the capital will exact vengeance on him for betraying their script. As the dust settles and the rebels prepare their next moves, Katniss feels the dual weight of hope and despair. The Mockingjay has survived, but the boy who once protected her is being consumed by the fire. Chapter 2: The Assault. Section 10. The capital's bombing of District 13 has left deep scars, both physical and emotional, but life in the underground district resumes with relentless precision. The people return to their tightly regimented schedules as if nothing has happened, though the tension lingers in every corridor. For Katniss, the survival of District 13 is overshadowed by the image of Peeta on the broadcast, frail and frantic, warning them of the attack at great personal cost. His defiance haunts her, for she knows the capital will not forgive him for exposing their plans. The guilt of being protected, while he suffers, begins to weigh on her more heavily than the rubble overhead. As the rebellion strengthens its hold across Panem, President Coin capitalizes on the Mockingjay's growing influence. Katniss is thrust back into the work of filming Propos, her face and voice used to inspire uprisings in the outer districts. Yet every time Peeta appears on Capitol television, the effect is corrosive. His words, often spoken with the calm cadence of someone struggling to hold on to himself, warn the districts that rebellion will bring annihilation. To the rebels his messages are seen as propaganda, but Katniss can hear the strain behind them, the telltale signs of a boy being hollowed out piece by piece. His continued presence becomes both a torment and a tether, binding her to the capital even as she serves the rebellion. The next broadcast escalates the psychological war. This time Peeta looks visibly diminished, his face gaunt, his movements sluggish, but his words strike like a blade. He addresses Katniss directly, warning her by name that the capital intends to obliterate District 13. The urgency of his voice cuts through the haze of propaganda, forcing even Coin to take the threat seriously. Moments later, alarms sound throughout the underground complex, confirming the accuracy of his warning. For Katniss, the moment is unbearable. Peeta has risked everything to keep her alive, but in doing so he has placed himself in even greater danger. As the people of District 13 rush into the bunkers, the ground trembles with the force of the capital's assault. Families huddle together in fear as the bombardment stretches on for hours, a test of endurance that threatens to collapse the very earth around them. Katniss clings to her sister and mother, but her thoughts remain fixed on Peeta, imagining the punishment he must be enduring even as she hides below. When the attack finally ceases and the doors reopen, District 13 has survived intact. Yet the victory feels hollow for Katniss. The Mockingjay still stands, but the boy who once kept her alive in the arena is now paying the price for her survival, his warning leaving her more desperate than ever to bring him back. Section 11. The fallout from Peeta's broadcast reverberates through District 13, but the leadership wastes no time in turning survival into strategy. For President Coin and her council, Peeta's warning is both a liability and a weapon. On the one hand, his defiance reveals cracks in the capital's grip, proving that even under torture he still resists. On the other, His words continue to be used by Snow to weaken the rebellion, with each appearance feeding doubt among the districts. Katniss feels the contradiction most intensely. Every glimpse of Peeta leaves her shaken, caught between gratitude for his bravery and terror at the thought of what the capital is doing to him in retaliation. The rebels focus their efforts on winning over the districts still wavering in loyalty, and Katniss is at the center of the campaign. Her visits to battle-scarred zones provide raw material for new propos, which Plutarch edits into powerful montages of destruction and defiance. These images are meant to counteract the capital's broadcasts of Peeta, and though they inspire hope, Katniss remains haunted by the growing signs of his deterioration. His voice trembles more with each broadcast, his posture slumps and his eyes lose their steadiness. The capital is not just using him, it is slowly dismantling him. A turning point arrives when Peeta suddenly breaks through the capital's script in another broadcast. His voice, hoarse and urgent, delivers a warning directly aimed at Katniss. He tells her the capital is preparing a fresh attack and urges her to act quickly. His sudden outburst disrupts the carefully crafted propaganda, and the cameras cut away almost immediately. For Katniss, the moment is like a knife to the chest. She sees proof that he is still himself, still trying to protect her, but she also knows such defiance will provoke brutal punishment. The thought of him suffering because of her fuels both her rage at Snow and her determination to fight back. In District 13, the warning is taken seriously, and once again the population is rushed into the bunkers as the bombardments begin. The hours in the underground shelter feel suffocating, the people listening in silence as the earth shakes above them. Katniss, trapped in the dark with her family, cannot stop imagining Peeta's torment. She feels increasingly helpless, used as a symbol of rebellion while powerless to save the person who has saved her time and again. The rebels may have survived the capital's assault, but Katniss emerges from the bunkers more desperate and conflicted than before, realizing that every victory for the rebellion comes at a personal cost that she is no longer sure she can bear. Section 12. The rebellion begins to shift its momentum outward, as victories in several districts provide proof that Snow's grip is weakening. For Katniss, however, the triumphs are overshadowed by her deepening fear for Peeta. Every new broadcast reveals him slipping further away, his body frailer, his voice tinged with desperation. The capital's cruelty is laid bare in his transformation, and while the rebellion uses Katniss's strength to inspire hope, the capital uses Peeta's suffering as a weapon to break her resolve. It becomes a war not only of bombs and soldiers, but of symbols, each side battling for the hearts of Panem through the faces of two former tributes. District 13 seizes the chance to intensify its campaign. Plutarch arranges for Katniss to appear in more propos, including visits to newly liberated areas where the rebels' victories can be celebrated. In one broadcast, she walks among cheering crowds in a district that has thrown off the capital's rule, her image radiating defiance and resilience. To the rebels, she represents the possibility of freedom. To Katniss, the attention feels hollow, for her mind is never far from the image of Peeta unraveling on Capitol television. The rebellion grows stronger, but Katniss feels weaker with each passing day, trapped in the impossible tension of serving as the Mockingjay while powerless to protect the person who matters most to her. The divide between Coin's priorities and Katniss's own becomes sharper. Coin and her council view Peeta as expendable, a casualty of war who has outlived his usefulness. Katniss cannot accept this cold calculation. She insists that the rebellion must work toward rescuing him and the other captured victors, refusing to let his suffering be dismissed as collateral damage. Her defiance angers Coin but also forces the leadership to acknowledge the truth. Without Katniss, the Mockingjay loses its fire. She may not wield military power, but her influence is undeniable, and Coin is forced to weigh her importance against her demands. At the same time, Gale emerges more prominently in Katniss's life. He has thrown himself wholly into the rebellion, his tactical mind and unflinching resolve making him an asset to District 13's military. Yet his growing ruthlessness unnerves Katniss. Gale speaks of strategy in cold, practical terms, willing to sacrifice lives if it means a quicker victory. His outlook contrasts sharply with Peeta's enduring compassion, reminding Katniss of the differences between them. As Gale and Katniss work together on missions, their shared history binds them, but the war also exposes the widening gap between his hardened pragmatism and her desperate need to preserve humanity in the face of destruction. Section 13. The war intensifies as District 13 directs its attention toward District 2, the capital's most critical stronghold outside the city itself. Unlike the poorer districts which have long suffered under Snow's rule, District 2 has benefited from its loyalty, its citizens serving as peacekeepers and military enforcers. Its allegiance makes it one of the final obstacles before the capital can be truly threatened, and the rebellion's leaders know that taking District 2 is essential. For Katniss, the move represents more than strategy. It is a moral trial, testing her ability to reconcile the costs of war with the values she still clings to. Katniss travels with Gale to observe the planning of the assault, and it is here that their differences become starkly apparent. Gale argues in favor of using ruthless tactics to crush resistance quickly, including strategies that blur the line between military and civilian targets. To him, the logic is simple. The faster the capital is stripped of its resources and allies, the fewer lives will be lost in the long run. Katniss, however, recoils at the thought of treating innocents as expendable. The conversation between them is tense, laced with unspoken truths about how war is shaping them in opposite directions. Where Gale grows more hardened and pragmatic, Katniss grows more determined to preserve compassion amid the violence. The target at the heart of District 2 is the Nut, a vast mountain fortress that houses the capital's arsenal and serves as its primary military hub. Seizing it will deal a devastating blow to Snow's forces, but the plan is brutal. Collapse the entrances to trap the capital's soldiers and workers inside, leaving them to suffocate. The cold efficiency of the strategy horrifies Katniss. She envisions not only soldiers but ordinary citizens, cooks and laborers who will be buried alive. For her, the Nut becomes a symbol of the war's moral compromise, a place where the line between victory and atrocity threatens to disappear. As the rebels prepare their assault, Katniss feels the weight of her symbolic role pressing down harder than ever. She knows she will be expected to appear in propos following the battle, to frame the rebellion's actions as righteous and necessary. Yet her conscience rebels against the thought. She does not want to be a mouthpiece for slaughter, nor does she want her image tied to strategies that deny people the chance to choose surrender. The Nut looms in her mind not just as a fortress, but as a test of who she will allow herself to become in a war that is already eroding everything she once believed in. Section 14. The assault on District 2 unfolds with brutal precision. Explosives are planted in the mountainside, and when they detonate, the earth itself becomes a weapon. Massive rock slides thunder down, sealing off the Nut's entrances and trapping those inside. For the rebels, the plan is a calculated success. The capital's strongest military base is neutralized without the need for prolonged fighting. Yet for Katniss, standing at a distance as the dust clouds rise, the victory feels hollow. She imagines the people inside suffocating in the darkness, buried alive not because of loyalty or defiance, but because they were caught in a war they could not escape. The aftermath is chaotic. Survivors from the Nut, desperate and terrified, pour into the open, some begging for mercy while others cling stubbornly to the capital's cause. Tension mounts as the rebels surround them, weapons raised, prepared to slaughter those who refuse to yield. Katniss cannot stay silent. Stepping into the fray, she delivers an impassioned speech that comes not from scripts or propaganda but from the raw depth of her conviction. She urges the people of District 2 to stop fighting for Snow, to recognize that his power is built on their suffering and the suffering of the other districts. She promises that there can be a place for them in the rebellion if they choose surrender, insisting that the future need not be one of endless bloodshed. Her plea is both desperate and brave, capturing the attention not only of the rebels, but of the cameras documenting the event. In that moment, Katniss embodies the Mockingjay more fully than she ever has before. She is not a figurehead repeating lines, she is a voice of conscience in the middle of a war that threatens to consume its humanity. Her words resonate, swaying many of those who moments earlier had been prepared to fight to the death. For the rebellion, the footage is gold, proof that the Mockingjay is more than a weapon of war. She is a symbol of choice, a reminder that the future can be different if people dare to believe in it. But her act of defiance does not go unpunished. As Katniss stands before the crowd making her appeal, a gunman from the Capitol's ranks takes aim and fires. The bullet strikes her, and the world collapses into pain and darkness. The sight of the Mockingjay falling silences the square, the shock reverberating through both rebels and loyalists. Though she survives the attack, the injury is severe, and her role in the war is once again marked by blood. For Katniss, the wounding is more than physical. It is a reminder that her voice, though powerful, makes her a target as much as a leader. The Mockingjay can inspire hope, but every act of defiance carries the cost of drawing the Capitol's fire. Section 15. Katniss's injury from the shooting leaves her confined to the underground hospital of District 13, her body battered and her spirit heavy. The bullet wound has taken its toll, and recovery is slow and painful. For a time she drifts in and out of consciousness, haunted by fevered dreams of fire, rubble, and Peeta's broken face on the Capitol broadcasts. The rebellion continues to move forward without her, victories unfolding in districts she cannot see, but she feels left behind, her usefulness reduced to a wounded figure lying in bed. The Mockingjay, it seems, has been temporarily grounded, and the silence gnaws at her. During her convalescence, she becomes increasingly aware of the growing tension in District 13. President Coin's grip has tightened, and her control over information is nearly absolute. The people live in rigid schedules, their lives dictated by the needs of the war, and dissent is smothered before it can take root. Katniss observes the signs with unease. Though 13 presents itself as the beacon of liberation, its discipline and severity echo the Capitol's own brand of control. For Katniss, this raises unsettling questions about the rebellion's true nature and what kind of future is being built in Snow's shadow. The Capitol, meanwhile, escalates its psychological war. Another broadcast of Peeta airs, this one more chilling than any before. He appears gaunt, his voice hoarse, his eyes wild. His desperation spills over as he pleads with Katniss to recognize the futility of her role, warning her yet again of the Capitol's vengeance. The words feel jagged and incoherent, and Katniss can see that he is unraveling under the Capitol's grip. To the rebels, it is simply evidence of Snow's cruelty. To Katniss, it is a knife twisting deeper into the wound of her guilt. She feels powerless, trapped between the propaganda machine of the Capitol and the calculated strategies of Coin, both of whom use Peeta in ways that deny his humanity. The moment that changes everything comes during a live broadcast, when Peeta is placed in front of the cameras once again. At first his words are confused, but suddenly his demeanor shifts. In a voice cracked and desperate, he warns District 13 of an imminent attack, his eyes wide with urgency. The cameras cut quickly, but the damage is done. He has risked everything to expose Snow's plans yet again. The warning saves lives, as alarms are raised and the population retreats into bunkers. For Katniss, the act is shattering. Peeta is still inside himself, still willing to fight for her even from within the Capitol's prison. But she knows that his rebellion will bring only more pain, and the knowledge that she cannot reach him drives her deeper into despair. Section 16. The warning Peeta delivers during the broadcast proves devastatingly accurate. Sirens wail through District 13 as the Capitol's bombs begin to fall, pounding the ground above with unrelenting force. The entire population is herded into the vast underground bunkers, a labyrinth of concrete that becomes both refuge and prison. For hours the people huddle in the suffocating dark, listening to the thunder of explosions overhead, and wondering if the fortress protecting them will hold. The air is stale, food scarce, and fear palpable. Katniss lies among them, her body still weakened from her injury, her mind whirling with the image of Peeta screaming his warning. Every boom of artillery feels like confirmation that he has been made to pay for that act of defiance. The atmosphere in the bunker is oppressive. Families clutch one another tightly, children whimper in the silence between blasts, and the weight of confinement presses down on everyone. Coin's leadership is visible even here. Guards patrol the narrow halls enforcing order with rigid discipline. The rebels remind the citizens that survival depends on obedience, but beneath the surface, frustration simmers. For Katniss, the days in confinement become a blur of dread and longing. She thinks constantly of Peeta, imagining him enduring punishment far worse than the claustrophobic monotony of the bunkers. The Capitol may be hammering District 13 with bombs, but the greater weapon is the one aimed directly at her heart. Despite the suffocating conditions, the rebels attempt to maintain morale. News filters in from the front lines, detailing the continued weakening of the Capitol's hold on outlying districts. The sense that the rebellion is gaining ground provides some comfort, though Katniss finds it hollow when weighed against Peeta's suffering. She also notices the way Coin uses the siege to reinforce her authority. Every announcement, every broadcast in the bunkers emphasizes Coin's leadership and the sacrifices required to preserve freedom. Katniss begins to sense that Coin is not simply guiding a war, she is crafting an image of herself as indispensable, a leader whose power extends far beyond the battlefield. When the bombardment finally ceases and the citizens emerge from the bunkers, the surface is scarred but intact. The attack has failed to destroy District 13, but it has succeeded in deepening the population's loyalty to Coin, who presents survival itself as proof of her wisdom and strength. For Katniss, however, the victory feels bitter. She cannot stop thinking of Peeta, punished in ways she cannot see for daring to warn her. Even as the rebellion grows closer to toppling snow, she feels herself unraveling, tethered to Peeta by a bond that war and propaganda cannot sever. The siege may have ended, but for Katniss the true battle is still raging in her heart. Section 17. The Capitol's attack on District the 13th of May have failed to break the rebellion, but its impact on Katniss is profound. She emerges from the bunkers with her health further weakened, her mind consumed by Peeta's torment. His warnings have saved lives twice now, yet each broadcast leaves him more battered, his body and spirit visibly disintegrating under the Capitol's hand. Katniss feels as if she is being slowly dismantled alongside him, her strength unraveling with every glimpse of his suffering. The rebellion pushes forward on multiple fronts, but her private war is a relentless cycle of guilt, longing and helplessness. It is during this fragile state that she receives devastating news. Johanna Mason, another former victor captured by the Capitol, appears in a broadcast. Her condition, though harrowing, is overshadowed by what follows. Peeta returns to the screen in a form almost unrecognizable. His face is gaunt, his voice strangled by rage and confusion. He no longer simply pleads with Katniss, he turns on her, accusing her of being the Capitol's target, the cause of destruction, the reason for his suffering. The words pierce her like blades, each accusation louder than the bombs that once fell on District 13. It becomes clear to Katniss and those around her that the Capitol has gone beyond torture. They have hijacked his very mind. The revelation strikes Katniss with paralyzing grief. Snow has found a way to transform Peeta from her protector into her would-be executioner, erasing the bond that once shielded them both in the arena. Plutarch and the others explain the Capitol's tactic, a process of psychological conditioning known as hijacking. Using tracker-jacker venom, they have twisted Peeta's memories, turning every association with Katniss into terror, pain and hatred. Where once she represented safety and love, she now represents his worst nightmares. For Katniss, the cruelty is unbearable. To see Peeta's love weaponized into loathing feels like the ultimate violation, not just of him but of everything they shared. While Coin and her council treat this revelation with clinical detachment, viewing Peeta as a casualty or even a potential threat, Katniss cannot detach. She knows that the Capitol's victory in corrupting him is meant not just to weaken the rebellion but to destroy her. Every step of her journey has been tied to Peeta's presence, his steady compassion anchoring her in a world of violence. Now, stripped of that anchor, she feels adrift. Yet beneath the despair lies a flicker of resolve. If the capital can twist his memories, perhaps those memories can be untangled, reclaimed. The Mockingjay may be powerless to save everyone, but Katniss clings to the belief that Peeta's true self is still there, buried beneath Snow's poison. That fragile hope becomes her fuel as the war presses closer to the capital's gates. Section 18. The rebellion takes its boldest step yet, a covert mission into the capital itself, aimed at rescuing the imprisoned victors. For weeks, Katniss has watched helplessly as Peeta's image was paraded across the airwaves, each appearance further evidence of Snow's cruelty. Now at last, there is a chance to bring him back, though the operation is fraught with peril. The assault teams, led by Gale, Boggs and other top soldiers, move under cover of night with the precision that District 13 has honed into an art. Their objective is clear: infiltrate the capital's heavily guarded stronghold and retrieve the captives before Snow can tighten his grip further. As the mission unfolds, Katniss remains in District 13, left behind not for lack of willingness, but because her presence would jeopardize both herself and the operation. The weight is agonizing. She clings to fragments of updates relayed by Plutarch and the command center, her mind spinning through every possible outcome. The thought that Peeta might finally be pulled from Snow's clutches fills her with fragile hope, but alongside it sits a gnawing fear: what if they are too late? What if the capital has already broken him beyond repair? Each hour of silence is a torment, every flicker of static on the communication screens a reminder of how fragile the line between success and disaster truly is. The impossible happens, the mission succeeds. The rebels storm the capital's prison and return with the victors in tow, a victory so audacious it shakes even the most hardened soldiers into celebration. Johanna Mason is among those rescued, battered but unbroken, and alongside her are Annie Cresta and, most importantly, Peeta Mellark. When Katniss sees him in the infirmary, she is overwhelmed by the sight of him alive. For a moment, relief floods her body, as if a piece of herself long severed has been restored. The rebellion seizes on the triumph, hailing it as proof that Snow's walls are crumbling, his power not invincible after all. Yet the reunion is not what Katniss longs for. When she approaches Peeta, instead of recognition or warmth, she meets violence. Twisted by the capital's hijacking, Peeta lunges at her, his hands closing around her throat with lethal force. The boy who once saved her from starvation, who carried her through fire and blood, is now bent on her destruction. Only the intervention of guards prevents her death. The attack leaves Katniss shattered, her brief moment of hope extinguished. Though Peeta's body has been freed from the capital, his mind is still ensnared. Snow's cruelty has followed them back to District 13, a poisonous echo that cannot be undone with rescue alone. The Mockingjay has gained her partner back in form, but she has lost him in essence, and that loss weighs heavier than any battlefield defeat. Chapter 3: The Assassin. Section 19. Peeta's return to District 13 is not the joyful reunion Katniss imagined. Instead of warmth, she meets violence, his mind poisoned by the capital until he sees her as a threat. The attack leaves her shaken, and the victory of rescuing the victors feels hollow. What the rebellion gained in bodies, Snow managed to keep in spirit, turning Peeta into a weapon aimed at Katniss herself. Doctors explain that the capital used Tracker-Jacker venom to hijack his memories, replacing love with terror. Every thought of Katniss now triggers fear and rage. The cruelty of the tactic horrifies her. Not only has Snow captured Peeta's body, but he has twisted his mind so that even the bond that once kept them alive in the arena has been corrupted. Coin meanwhile grows impatient with Katniss's instability, seeing her less as a girl and more as a tool. Only Haymitch and Plutarch argue for her importance, reminding Coin that the rebellion still needs its Mockingjay. Even in her broken state, Katniss remains the symbol around which the districts rally. Gale becomes her steady companion during this time, but his ruthlessness unsettles her. He sees victory in terms of sacrifice and strategy, while she clings to compassion in the midst of war. Their closeness is undeniable, yet so is the distance between their worldviews. As the rebellion gains momentum across Panem, Katniss struggles to find her place, caught between the larger war and the personal battle to hold on to the boy she once loved. Section 20. District 13 treats the rescue of the victors as a propaganda victory, but behind closed doors the situation is grim. Peeta remains volatile, confined under guard after his violent outburst at Katniss. She watches from a distance, desperate to reach him yet terrified by the hatred in his eyes. The boy who once represented safety now embodies danger, and the cruel irony of that leaves her adrift. The doctors begin slow, careful therapy with him, exposing him to memories and trying to separate truth from capital-induced lies. Progress is minimal, and each session leaves Katniss aching to step in, though she knows her presence is the greatest trigger. It becomes clear that restoring him will be a long, uncertain process, and there are moments when she doubts he can ever return to himself. Katniss finds herself clashing more often with Coin. The president's focus remains on strategy and power, and she treats Peeta as a liability rather than someone worth saving. Katniss senses Coin's ambition growing, the way she quietly cements authority with every speech and victory. Snow may be the enemy they are fighting, but Katniss begins to realize that the woman leading the rebellion has her own hunger for control. Amid this, Gale and Katniss are drawn closer through shared missions and planning. His dedication and clear-headed pragmatism steady her, but his cold view of warfare unsettles her just as often. He speaks openly about doing whatever is necessary to win, even if it means civilian casualties. Katniss, still holding on to the fragile thread of compassion, wonders whether survival in this war requires becoming someone she doesn't want to be. Section 21. District 13's leaders begin preparing for the most dangerous phase of the rebellion, a ground invasion of the capital itself. The city, fortified with hidden traps and loyal peacekeepers, cannot be toppled by bombs alone. The plan is to insert specialized squads who can navigate the streets and bring the fight directly to Snow. Katniss learns that she, along with Gale and other victors, has been assigned to one of these units. Though her role is framed as symbolic, her presence is crucial for morale and propaganda. The squad Katniss joins is composed of experienced soldiers, led by the calm and disciplined Boggs. Alongside Gale are Finnick, Cressida and her camera crew, reminding Katniss that even here, her image is as important as her actions. The unit is carefully described as a star squad, valuable but not expected to be on the front lines. Their real job is to film staged footage that will fuel the rebellion's broadcasts. Katniss resents this role. She is not content to be paraded through another battlefield while others bleed for the cause, but Coin and Plutarch insist that her symbolic power is worth more than her combat skills. Still, Katniss harbors her own secret agenda. The sight of Peeta's hijacked mind has left her with a single burning resolution: she intends to kill Snow with her own hands. She hides this from her commanders, but nurtures the thought in silence, seeing it as the only act that might make sense of all her losses. To her, the war is no longer about freedom or power struggles. It is about vengeance against the man who has orchestrated her suffering and destroyed Peeta's soul. As training intensifies, Katniss studies the capital maps, memorizing routes and strategies. Gale thrives in the preparation, his sharp tactical mind making him a natural soldier, while Finnick masks his unease with humor that grows darker with each passing day. The squad bonds over drills and shared meals, but beneath the camaraderie lies a sense of dread. Everyone knows the capital is a labyrinth designed to kill intruders in brutal and ingenious ways. For Katniss, that knowledge sharpens her determination. If the capital is a trap, then she will walk into it willingly, not as a pawn of Coin, but as an assassin determined to end Snow's reign with one shot. Section 22. The capital invasion moves forward, and Katniss's squad is deployed to the outskirts of the city. At first, the atmosphere feels deceptively calm. They march through abandoned streets, past rubble and burned-out buildings, the silence broken only by the distant echo of artillery. Yet everyone knows the calm is an illusion. Snow has turned his capital into a maze of hidden traps, pods as they're called, engineered to kill with precision and creativity. Each step feels like a gamble, every street corner a potential death sentence. Boggs, as squad leader, reveals more of the truth to Katniss as they advance. Their unit is valuable not because of its combat skills, but because they are meant to be filmed for propaganda. Though labeled a fighting squad, they are shielded from the most direct battles, their assignments carefully chosen for safety and spectacle. To Katniss, this is another reminder that she is a pawn in Coin's game, her survival less about justice and more about image. The realization fuels her secret resolve to take matters into her own hands, to carry out her mission of assassinating Snow regardless of Coin's designs. Life in the squad becomes its own rhythm. They eat together, sleep in makeshift quarters, and spend hours waiting for new orders. The camera crew captures everything, framing their lives as symbols of hope for the districts watching from afar. Katniss grows restless under the charade. Gale focuses on strategy, Finnick leans into gallows humor to ease tension, and Boggs keeps everyone steady with his quiet authority. Beneath it all, though, lies the knowledge that the city is waiting to spring its traps. Each soldier feels the weight of being both actor and target, filmed in a war where survival is never guaranteed. For Katniss, the time spent in the capital sharpens her inner conflict. She thinks of Peeta constantly, knowing he is somewhere nearby in District 13, struggling against the venom in his mind. She remembers how Snow has always played them against each other, from the first Hunger Games to the Quarter Quell, and she sees this mission as her chance to finally sever that chain. To kill Snow is to reclaim not just her freedom but Peeta's as well. As the squad inches deeper into the capital, Katniss feels the pressure mounting. The city may be a death trap, but she is determined to walk through it step by step, until she stands in front of the man she has sworn to end. Section 23. The squad's march into the capital proves more dangerous than any of them anticipated. Pods are triggered in sudden terrifying bursts, walls collapsing, explosions erupting, or hidden weapons springing from the ground. Each encounter reminds them that they are not entering a city, but a battlefield designed like an arena. For Katniss, the capital feels like a grotesque echo of the Hunger Games, only now the stakes are the entire rebellion. The irony is not lost on her. Snow has managed to turn his capital into the ultimate arena, a place where even trained soldiers must tread as tributes. It is during one of these missions that the capital unleashes a pod, which nearly kills them all, and Boggs takes the brunt of the attack. Gravely wounded, he knows he will not survive, and in his final moments he makes a deliberate choice. He entrusts the holo, the device that maps the pods of the capital, to Katniss instead of passing it to Coin's representatives. With this act, Boggs signals his distrust of the president of District 13 and his belief that Katniss must be the one to shape the future. His dying words push her further toward independence, affirming that she is not just a symbol but a leader in her own right. Boggs's death devastates the squad. Without his steady authority, the group feels exposed, vulnerable, and unmoored. The camera crew captures the moment, and Katniss senses that even tragedy will be used for propaganda. Yet beneath the grief, she clings to Boggs's final gesture. With the holo in her possession, she now carries both the burden of leadership and the dangerous knowledge of how to navigate the capital's traps. The decision forces her into a role she has resisted but can no longer avoid. She must lead, and she must decide what the squad truly fights for. As the squad presses deeper into the city, Katniss resolves to follow her own path. She tells herself, and quietly convinces her companions, that their true mission is not to act as Coin's propaganda pawns but to reach Snow's mansion and kill him. The risk is enormous and the capital grows deadlier with each block, but her conviction steadies her. For Katniss, Boggs's sacrifice is a turning point. It transforms her from a reluctant figurehead into a commander with her own agenda. The rebellion may still call her Mockingjay, but now she begins to step into something more dangerous, the assassin she is sworn to be. Section 24. After Boggs's death, the squad is forced to regroup quickly, and the weight of leadership shifts to Katniss almost by default. She has the holo, she has Boggs's final trust, and now the soldiers look to her for decisions. Though she doubts herself, she knows hesitation will cost lives. The capital's streets are riddled with pods, each one more vicious than the last, and survival depends on decisive choices. For the first time, Katniss steps into the role of commander, balancing instinct with responsibility as she leads them deeper into hostile ground. Their progress is immediately tested. Traps spring without warning, explosive mines that rip through concrete, chemical sprays that burn skin, and mechanical beasts designed to tear intruders apart. The capital has prepared its city like a war machine, and each block conquered feels like another arena battle. Losses mount, and every death hardens the squad's determination but also frays their morale. The presence of the camera crew ensures that even these horrors are broadcast to the districts, transforming their suffering into spectacle once more. During this time, Peeta is unexpectedly reassigned to their squad. His presence unsettles everyone, especially Katniss, who fears both for her life and for his. Though his episodes of violence are still unpredictable, his strategic mind and deep knowledge of her help the squad in unexpected ways. Katniss feels torn between anger and pity. Peeta is both her greatest danger and her oldest ally. His struggle to distinguish real from false memories becomes a haunting mirror of her own battle between love and war. Katniss pushes the squad toward Snow's mansion with growing urgency, telling herself their mission is no longer Coin's but her own. Each step draws her closer to the capital's heart and closer to Snow. Yet with every life lost and every trap endured, the cost of vengeance grows heavier. She wonders how much of herself will survive if she reaches him at all. Section 25. The capital tightens its grip on the squad with each passing block. Traps grow more elaborate and deadly, forcing the group into a relentless cycle of planning, advancing, and mourning the losses they cannot prevent. Tension builds among the soldiers as fear eats away at their focus, and every shadow feels like another hidden weapon. What once seemed like a city is now nothing but a killing ground, designed with Snow's cruel precision to break intruders physically and psychologically. It is in this crucible that Peeta's presence becomes impossible to ignore. Though unstable, he proves unexpectedly valuable. His sharp instincts and memories of past capital tactics help the squad avoid certain death more than once. Yet his unpredictable outbursts remain dangerous, and Katniss struggles with the contradiction. He is both their salvation and their greatest risk. The others debate whether he should remain with them, but Katniss argues for his inclusion, unwilling to abandon him even in this fractured state. Finnick, too, emerges as a stabilizing force in the chaos. Beneath his easy humor lies deep loyalty, and his companionship becomes a quiet comfort to Katniss. Having endured his own torments at the capital's hands, he understands better than most what it means to carry pain and still move forward. His resilience stands as a reminder that survival in this war is not only about strategy, but also about holding on to fragments of humanity. As the squad advances, Katniss's determination sharpens into something cold and focused. Every casualty fuels her conviction that the war cannot end until Snow is dead. To her, the rebellion is no longer about slogans or symbols, but about a singular act of justice or vengeance that might finally close the circle of suffering. The city is still filled with traps, but for Katniss, the real target lies at its center, waiting in his mansion. Section 26. The squad's journey through the capital reaches its most harrowing stage when they are driven underground. Forced to abandon the streets laced with pods, they descend into the city's sewer system, a place as treacherous as any arena. The tunnels are damp, suffocating, and disorienting, with echoes that make every sound seem like a threat. For Katniss, the claustrophobic darkness becomes a test of endurance, and the sense that danger is closing in never fades. It is here that Snow unleashes one of his most horrific weapons, the mutts designed to hunt and kill like relentless predators. These creatures, twisted mockeries of humanity with reptilian features and razor-sharp claws, attack the squad in the sewers. The battle is brutal, fought in close quarters where the darkness and rising water amplify the terror. Several squad members are slaughtered, and even the veterans struggle to keep formation. Katniss fights desperately, driven by sheer survival and the knowledge that there is no retreat. In the chaos, Finnick's courage shines. He fights with unmatched ferocity, holding off the mutts so that the others can escape. But the swarm overwhelms him, and in one of the most devastating moments Finnick is torn down. His death strikes Katniss like a physical blow, another beloved ally lost to Snow's cruelty. There is no time to grieve properly. They are forced to continue moving, Finnick's sacrifice etched into Katniss's heart as yet another reminder of how much the capital has taken. Shaken and bloodied, the survivors press onward, emerging from the sewers into the war-torn streets above. Their numbers are fewer, their strength drained, but their purpose is sharper than ever. Katniss carries with her not only Boggs's trust and Peeta's fragile humanity but also Finnick's memory, which steels her resolve. Each loss narrows her focus to a single point, the mansion where Snow waits. The rebellion may call her Mockingjay, but here in the capital, she feels only like an assassin closing in on her target. Section 27. The capital lies in chaos as Katniss and her surviving squad move toward Snow's mansion. Refugees pour into the streets, driven toward the gates under the promise of shelter. But Katniss realizes too late that the movement is part of Snow's final defense, using civilians as both shield and bait. The crowd surges toward the mansion, and within it, Katniss sees children at the front, her horror deepening as the first explosions erupt. Pods detonate, tearing through innocents in a storm of fire and rubble, turning the square into a slaughterhouse. Then comes a second wave of bombs, this time carried by medical hovercrafts marked with the insignia of the rebellion. At first it seems like a rescue, but the bombs ignite again, killing both the wounded and those rushing to help. Among them is Prim, Katniss's sister, who had come as a medic. The sight of her death, sudden and merciless, shatters Katniss more completely than any wound she has endured. In that instant, Snow's cruelty and Coin's ambition blur together, and the war's justifications collapse into ashes. After the capital's fall, Snow is captured, and the rebellion proclaims victory. Yet for Katniss, there is no triumph. She confronts Snow in his greenhouse, where he insists that the final bombing was not his doing but Coin's strategy to secure power. His words ring true in Katniss's heart. She sees in Coin the same manipulative hunger that once fueled Snow, and she realizes that replacing one tyrant with another will only perpetuate the cycle of cruelty. During the execution ceremony, Katniss is tasked with killing Snow before the watching world. But at the decisive moment she turns her arrow on Coin, ending the president of District 13 instead. Snow dies amid the chaos, not by Katniss's hand but in the collapse of the order he built. Katniss herself is broken, her act seen as both betrayal and liberation, and she is placed under watch until the dust of politics settles. In time she is sent back to District 12, where the ruins of her home and the ghosts of her family wait. The story closes not with glory but with survival. Katniss and Peeta, scarred by all they have endured, begin slowly to rebuild a life in the ashes. Their bond, fractured by war and cruelty, mends in fragile steps as they plant new roots in soil that once knew only fire. The rebellion has toppled the capital, but the real victory lies in the quiet persistence of those who carry on. For Katniss, the journey ends not as a Mockingjay or assassin, but as a survivor who chooses to keep living when so much has been lost. Conclusion. The narrative of Mockingjay traces the raw, unrelenting path of war, and its profound impact on those caught within it. From the smoldering ruins of District 12 in the ashes, to the treacherous streets and tunnels of the capital, in The Assault and the Assassin, the story presents both the brutality of conflict and the resilience of the human spirit. The chapters are threaded with loss, betrayal, and moral complexity, yet amid the devastation, they also reveal the enduring capacity for courage, empathy, and survival. In the early days of rebellion, the characters grapple with grief and displacement. The destruction of District 12 shapes their motivations, turning personal loss into a commitment to collective resistance. Katniss, thrust into the role of Mockingjay, must navigate the delicate balance between symbol and soldier. Her decisions carry consequences not only for herself but for entire districts, and the burden of leadership tests both her humanity and her capacity to endure. The emotional and physical toll of war is relentless, as alliances shift and friends fall, leaving the survivors to reconcile their ambitions with the scars they bear. As the struggle escalates in the capital, the narrative exposes the intimate horrors of a city turned into a labyrinth of death. Traps, mutts, and bombs create an environment where no corner is safe, and every choice is a gamble between life and death. Yet amid the chaos, moments of loyalty and compassion emerge. Finnick's courage, Peeta's intuition, and the unwavering support of Katniss's allies illuminate the ways in which human connection persists even in the most inhumane conditions. These relationships, fragile and fleeting, provide the emotional anchor that allows survival to remain more than mere endurance. The story's culmination in the assassination of Coin and the death of Snow crystallizes the moral ambiguities at the heart of rebellion. Victory does not arrive in clear triumph, but in the careful negotiation between justice and vengeance. Katniss's ultimate act, the choice to kill Coin instead of Snow, reflects a profound understanding of power, corruption, and the cyclical nature of tyranny. It underscores the central truth that war does not yield easy victories, it demands clarity of conscience amid the moral fog. Survival, in this context, becomes an act of discernment as much as of endurance. Returning to District 12, the narrative closes with a tempered hope. Katniss and Peeta's gradual rebuilding of their lives demonstrates that recovery, though slow and incomplete, is possible. Their survival carries the weight of memory, the lost to the traumatized and the scarred, but it also embodies the potential for new beginnings. The rebellion may have toppled the capital, but the ultimate victory lies in the ability to preserve one's humanity, to forge bonds that endure, and to create meaning in a world shaped by both destruction and resilience. Mockingjay is at its heart a study of the human spirit tested by extremes of cruelty, power, and loss. It is a chronicle of survival, the ethical complexity of leadership, and the quiet victories that emerge when compassion and courage persist against overwhelming odds. The ashes of the old world give way to tentative renewal, and the narrative leaves readers with a vision not of unblemished triumph but of endurance, reflection, and the enduring effort to live fully after the storm. This has been the summary of Mockingjay. Summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Archie.